Section 5.1 Angels in the Old Testament. In the earliest Hebrew scriptures, angels, derived from the Hebrew term malach, meaning messenger, are primarily depicted as emissaries assigned to deliver God's word and carry out His will. These figures often appear in forms so closely resembling humanity, or even God Himself, that they are nearly indistinguishable from one another. For example, in encounters with patriarchs such as Abraham and Jacob, angels are portrayed as travelers or strangers, conveying divine intentions in ways that seamlessly blend with human experience, while simultaneously speaking with the authority of God. These portrayals serve to blur the boundary between the angel as a distinct being and the divine message they embody, making it challenging to separate the messenger from the message itself. This ambiguity is purposeful, reflecting a theological depth where the angel is not simply an independent entity, but rather a manifestation of God's immediate presence and will. Genesis chapter 18 verses 1-3. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and, lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Genesis chapter 32 verses 24-30. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him, and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. In the story of Jacob, the figure he wrestles with is initially described as a man, but later revealed to be God, illustrating the ambiguity surrounding divine messengers in the Hebrew Scriptures. This same ambiguity is particularly evident in the figure known as the angel of the Lord, a mysterious presence who often speaks in the first person as though he were God himself. Rather than being depicted as a fully separate and autonomous being, this angel functions as a direct manifestation of God's presence, temporarily embodied to deliver a divine message. When this angel speaks, his words and authority are indistinguishable from those of God, emphasizing divine agency rather than suggesting the existence of a distinct, independent entity. This portrayal holds theological and symbolic significance, suggesting that angels in the Old Testament are not merely independent celestial beings with self-determined roles, but extensions of God's will. They serve as instruments of His divine purpose, blurring the line between messenger and message. This highlights the immediacy and intimacy of divine communication with humanity in these early texts. Exodus chapter 3 verses 2-4. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and, behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside, and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. As evidenced by the depiction of the angel of the Lord, there is a clear overlap between this figure and God himself, often presenting him as essentially one and the same. This suggests that the early biblical texts regarding heavenly messengers do not focus on the distinct individuality or personal identity of angels. Instead, they emphasize their role as instruments of God's will and expressions of His divine presence. Adding another layer of complexity, the Hebrew term malach does not inherently distinguish between human and non-human messengers. It simply refers to someone, or something, entrusted with the task of delivering God's word and executing His will. This linguistic nuance further blurs the lines between divine and human agency, emphasizing a functional distinction rather than an ontological one in the early depiction of God's messengers. Haggai chapter 1 verse 13. Then spake Haggai the Lord's messenger, Malach, in the Lord's message unto the people, saying, I am with you, saith the Lord. Malachi chapter 3 verse 1. Behold, I will send my messenger, Malach, and he shall prepare the way before me, and the Lord, whom ye seek, shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. Haggai is unequivocally a human prophet, not a celestial being, and the verse from Malachi is commonly understood in modern interpretations to refer to John the Baptist or another human figure who would precede the Messiah. This interpretation introduces additional ambiguity to the concept of angels, as it highlights the flexibility with which biblical texts use the term malach to describe both human figures and divine messengers. This blurring of boundaries between human and supernatural roles adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of angels, urging us to discern the nature and function of these figures within the broader context of biblical narratives.